It's far from being all over YouTube. It's far from being all over everyone. And please welcome back my regular guests, Coqui Pirate.
Delete.
And you, James?
Hello there, you know who I am, and you know in which year I was born. Learn to live with it.
Right. Now, when doing Doctor Who got to this point, the guy turns to his guest and he said, there are millions of Doctor Who fans worldwide, and only a handful have actually done what we've just done. And yes, this could not be more momentous. It is the end of a Doctor era. That's the first time that the Doctor's era would end, the first generation. It's also a beginning, because it's the first... Well, it's two beginnings, because it's the first Cybermen. Where does one begin? I don't know. I think I just asked, were you surprised by either of those things, Coqui?
The regeneration, I didn't even think much of it, which that is what surprised me, that it didn't surprise me, now that you asked me.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, I'll try and be a bit segmented, but start off with kind of general thoughts on this story, although it's impossible to talk about this story without talking about the first Cybermen and the fact that it is the last first Doctor story. So, Coqui, your general thoughts.
I liked it. I mean, yeah, obviously some aspects of the story made me laugh a bit. But, you know, honestly, I think that these Cybermen are much more terrifying than any of the modern Cybermen. And yeah, the costume looks cheesy, but the Cybermen always look cheesy. In this case, I suppose I am kind of annoyed sometimes when I do this kind of straw Vulcan thing, that they're, like, apparently emotion is inefficient, and, compassion is weakness. There's this whole idea that being calculated and rational is somehow the antithesis to being human. But, obviously that's a trope that's going to be used, and...
well, this is the invention of that trope.
Yeah. Okay, in this case, I fault them a bit more, because it's a stupid trope. But that being said, it played well. The Cybermen were scarier than the other villains I've seen in the show so far. The whole Other Earth thing, it was weird, but I can see it, really capturing the imagination. I've seen modern sci-fi movies that sort of have that kind of thing. But, when... The title's the 10th planet. I thought it would be the 10th planet from the sun. It was not. But yeah, and planet draining, I'm not sure I understood any of that, but okay.
I'm not quite sure I did either, no. Yeah. But yeah, I get the twin planet thing, except for the fact that why would the continents actually be a similar shape? Because, I mean, so they had the same exact continental shift from more or less the same Pangea. What? And
was it rotating fast enough that they could see it, or were they looking at a camera that was moving around there? Either way, they saw the continents at a ridiculously fast speed.
Yeah, that seems to change as well. It's stationary later. I don't know what happened there. Because the odd thing is that Pluto was deemed not a planet, and only recently has regained its status as a planet. So for a while, this should have been called the 9th planet. Although I don't know about 1986.
Wait, Pluto's a planet again? What?
No, I think that was a joke, Alex. Astronomers still only classify 8 planets. If you were to classify Pluto as a planet, then you'd have to classify all of the other dwarf planets in the Oort cloud as planets. So
they kept Pluto as a planet until they found something bigger than Pluto's, Ceres.
Ceres. But the point is, Alex, the Facebook meme saying, "I'm back, bitches, Pluto was a planet again," that was just a hoax.
Oh, damn it. I had to be caught out falling for a hoax in a podcast. I think that's not even the first time that's happened.
Yeah.
Am I unlucky? Stupid. Oh, anyway. Any other thoughts? Yeah, I actually really love these Cybermen. They're very different from the ones I grew up with, that were very kind of very post Star Wars. They even sounded a bit like Darth Vader, and they're quite chunky. They're quite quite wide kind of heads and things. And these ones, you get the impression of definitely of tallness. Like classic series Cybermen are always played by 6 foot plus actors. They were always meant to be really tall, which I guess makes sense. That's like how Darth Vader is taller, because I guess if you want to, if you're making prosthetic legs, you'd make them long. I guess that makes sense. And yeah, they've got human hands. You can kind of make out their eyes. They are just that bit more human, and you get a sense of them being very strong and invulnerable. Other than the fact that I will say, new series Who, particularly the Russell T Davies era, was really criticised for pulling a switch, the pull a switch ending that gets rid of all the bad guys. And this kind of, at least this was the first time they did it. I don't think the classic series did it that much, but it was a bit kind of, if they lose their planet, they all fade and die, which is a bit of a weakness for a master race to have. I was told an amusing story yesterday, because these original Cybermen divide the fandom. You either think that they're silly and camp and have annoying voices. Those voices, though, have come back for some of the Big Finish audios. There's a prequel called Spare Parts, where you actually, you don't see it happen, you hear it happen. Okay, it's an audio drama. The actual tragedy, the tragic story of the Mondasians and how this happened to them. It's a very chilling audio drama, even more chilling than this, and this was pretty chilling, although I realised that calling it chilling is kind of a pun, but anyway. But then other people, they're the Marmites on Cybermen. The other half of the fandom thinks they'll never be this scary again. I'm of that school of thought, and I'm going to tell you this story, and I really hope that there's a recording of this. When Deep Breath premiered in cinemas and so on, if you saw it in the cinema, you got a live feed from the Odeon Leicester Square with the cast and crew. And Jenna Coleman, I think it was, asked this question, knowing that Peter Capaldi is a massive, lifelong fan. Of course, he grew up with the 60s Doctor Who. And when asked, I think it was Jenna who asked, what monster from the classic series would you most like to be brought back now? And Peter Capaldi said the original Cybermen from the 10th Planet. They were by far the scariest, and they should try and recreate them in the new era. And Moffat laughingly dismissed them as, a balaclava on backwards. And Peter Capaldi actually got visibly angry with Moffat and started ranting at him. And I really hope there's a recording of that. Because otherwise, I wish I'd paid to see it in cinemas just to see Peter Capaldi go full Malcolm Tucker on Stephen Moffat. In any case, James, your general thoughts on this serial?
In terms of scientific accuracy, it is right up there with Kill the Moon or the Daleks hollowing out the Earth to create a spaceship in the Dalek Occupation of Earth. However, unlike Kill the Moon and much more like Dalek Occupation of Earth, 10th Planet can be forgiven because it actually had a story. It wasn't simply revolving around the ethical quandary that never was. So, all of the whole thing about how can all of the points that you raised and all of the others which exist, they can all be forgiven as window dressing for the basic plot. And being 1966, what we have to remember is that this is the first time people in Britain, British science fiction writers, looked at America, the US, John F. Kennedy stating before his assassination that, yes, they would put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And the first 2 episodes primarily are basically prophesizing the Apollo 13 catastrophe. There are astronauts in orbit. They're going to die. We've got to get them down. That was the basis of the suspense. And if you were in the 1960s, especially, today it's not really that big a deal. Because, the whole point of Kill the Moon, we've lost interest in space travel. Yes. Your point is obvious. Move on. So that is an important point to raise about the serial, the differences in culture between the 1960s and the mid-2010s. But beyond that, so leaving aside the science, it's the first time we see a tin pot little Hitler taking the law into his own hands, risking everybody's life because he's obsessed with his solution, taking revenge, etc. Hey, what are you doing down here at the North Pole? This is mighty suspicious. Let's arrest you and blame you.
He does. He's scared that his son's going to get killed.
I was getting to that point. Okay. Unlike in the Troughton era, there is actually a reason for this guy's slow descent into paranoid genocide and insanity. But, so, get used to this, Coqui. There's plenty of this left to come.
Don't put him off.
But also, main point, this is Ben's introduction as a character. Unfortunately, Polly is the Barbara or the Susan in this episode, in the serial. She's very much the fifth wheel. At one point, she is literally reduced to making coffee because there's nothing else for her to do. Oh, and can we just mention the token stereotypical Italian soldier whose first reaction when being told, there's a woman out there, hey, bella bambina.
Oh, yeah. People are impossible. He just laughs at the thought of there being people. But when there's a woman, apparently the
Oh, yes. To quote Martin Clunes in Men Behaving Badly when he was talking about the original Star Trek, it's an idealistic vision of all nations and all creeds working together in perfect harmony as long as there's no bloody Italians.
To be honest, that's something that really struck me. It was a very diverse cast. You know, they had like people with different accents. You know, one sounded American, one said another said Zed. They had the black guy that, of course, died promptly because, you know, characters are white, disposable people are black. That's a long, you know, understood trope. But, you know, it sort of seems like a proto Star Trek thing.
Well, they're contemporaneous with Star Trek at the moment. I think it's quite impressive that in 1966 they were thinking, in 1986, of course there'll be black astronauts. So there is that.
Oh, yes. And, obviously, just for anyone posting an angry comment, just like the original Men Behaving Badly joke, as long as there's not any bloody Italians line was satirical and ironic. That's the point. But, yes, that was even though the American general could not have been more of a stereotype and the Italian soldier could not have been more of a stereotype if they tried. Oh, and the Swiss bureaucrats in charge of the whole operation. But so on and so forth, they were trying, at least in this, although the black character, the black astronaut, was disposable, he wasn't a henchman or a stupid, superstitious henchman like Jamaica in The Smugglers. But, going back to Ben, though, he really shone in this episode, so... Coqui, because you hated him, Well, to begin with, because yes, the whole rape culture thing in the nightclub was seriously problematic. Did you think that he improved in this episode? Or even though he's trying to be even more Cockney. I have never heard the term geezer used so much in less than an hour.
Wait, and geezer? Oh yeah, that was something that bugged me. What I thought geezer was like an old, senior person, and he uses it to refer to the Cybermen.
No, you might say old geezer, but no, a geezer can be. It can be used the same as the word bloke. So yeah, but what something I heard someone point out though is the irony of him saying something like, "I can't imagine fighting off these geezers with a screwdriver."
Oh, but my opinion of him has gone from bad to neutral now. He seems all okay, I guess.
Yeah. So,
I think he shows a lot of initiative and heroism, and also the compassion that even though Cybermen aren't human anymore, he regrets having to kill them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yes, and then the general who is going into full tin pot little Hitler mode. You did what you had to do, Polly. And one of Polly's only real lines in the serial. You're enjoying this, aren't you?
But yes, another thing they're introducing, of course, is the idea of, when are you still you? When are humans no longer humans? Of killing something that was human once. Obviously, they make a meal of that in the new series, perhaps hammering it home a bit too much in the new series. But it is, we're seeing the births of so many things. But this is the first, Kit Pedler, and bearing in mind Kit Pedler, as much as you can prick holes in the science of this, Kit Pedler actually was a scientist. In fact, he was head of the microscope, what do you call it? The electron microscope department at the London University. Then went on to advise another BBC show, a factual science show on BBC called Tomorrow's World, which was still going in my day, in James's day, and was unofficially the scientific advisor to Doctor Who for a long time before this. His writing partnership with Jerry Davis will give us a lot more harder science fiction in the Troughton era, which is, that's the thing. This is the first, I would say, horror in Doctor Who, and also the launching the Troughton era as one being harder science fiction, and two being far more of a monster show.
But jumping off from that point, Alex, and going back to what you were saying about the Cybermen, defying popular opinion as usual, I neither love nor hate the original Cybermen because, yes, it's a different kind of horror. In the 80s, Peter Davison, Earthshock, they were trying to be the Darth Vader intimidating type, as you say.
Yeah.
But in this episode, in this serial, everything revolved around demonstrating that, no, they are completely emotionless and without compassion. That, and just one point about the switch just flick the switch ending. Oops, they're all dead and we can go home now. Let's all have some cake. Yes, it is explained if you buy into the idea that, yes, they couldn't simply conquer the Earth. They had to destroy the Earth to make sure that Mondas would survive, because all of their power stations, all of the power link-ups were on Mondas. They couldn't move those to Earth or rebuild them. They were utterly dependent on the power source and other life support on Mondas. So, again, they had to destroy the Earth to make sure that Mondas would survive. It didn't. They died. So, again, it's almost like... it's almost like Moffat's 45-minute syndrome. If this serial had been possibly 6 episodes long, if it had a bigger budget, one of the things they mentioned at the beginning, not many personnel here, are there? Yes, the General hates personnel. Oh, and it's 1986, so the computers will be able to do everything. No, you just didn't have the budget to hire more actors. But... yeah, if they'd had a bigger budget, if this had been spread over a couple of serials even, then they could have gotten into that a bit more. What you're saying about this being the first time of exploring whether it's right to kill something that was human once, all of the ethical quandaries which New Who ploughs into the ground. Again, I didn't really get that sense from this serial because there simply wasn't enough time to dwell on it. And in the name of the great holy donkey, how I am regretting not introducing myself in this podcast as, hello there, this is James Uscroft, you James, 1978. But, God, that sounded terrible. Yeah, but still, the point is, there was so much here, and in spite of all of the problems, the overall story still worked. And more importantly, it seeded a great deal for the future. Because just like the Daleks, every time you think they're dead, for the love of the great holy donkey.
There are some great Cyberman serials to come, and yes, you mentioned, of course, I know at some point in the 60s, maybe not at this point, the voice boxes they use are actually the voice boxes for people who've had their vocal cords removed, which may have been a new thing then. I know 1966 was the year of the first heart transplant, which might be why this kind of thing was, what people were thinking about. I am also going to, just to make a new series reference to the cyber creator in the new series, saying to the Doctor something like, wouldn't you rather live without pain, without fear, without loss, without grief? And I think that, the point's been made before, plays in almost to a kind of reference to imperialism. Bear with me. That from the point of view of these Cybermen who just turn up and casually announce everything about them and why they are what they are and yada yada yada, and I don't think even expect that much resistance from people being made like them, because if you're a Cyberman, it's good to be a Cyberman. Why would you want all those quote-unquote weaknesses? A bit like, one example would be the British Empire and slavery. They weren't even baptized before us. We saved their souls. That it's good to be cyber converted. I think, Coqui, how about your response to that?
I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, I'm not sure about the authorial intent, but it certainly fits very well. That, they see themselves as superior and that, they'd be fine doing things their ways, even though their ways horrify us. Even if we would be that much happier as a Cyberman. And, there was talk about, peaceful coexistence that they weren't having any of. So, I definitely say it's a fair comparison.
Oh, yeah. This is the point with ethnocentrism, anthropocentrism, or whatever the correct term is, in general. Whatever we are, whatever we have, we always think it is superior. That the rest of the world is just the rest of the world just hates our freedoms or is jealous of our freedoms. Well, to use Iran as a good example, there are many people. Or even better, the the newspaper comic strip of a woman in a burqa and a woman in a bikini and sunglasses passing each other in the street. The woman in the bikini thinking, everything covered except for her eyes, what an oppressive male-dominated culture, and the woman in the burqa thinking, nothing covered except for her eyes, what an oppressive male-dominated culture. So it is a matter of our own perspective. There is no such thing as right or wrong for anyone else. This is the point that I'm always making in my YouTube videos. We have to look beyond ourselves, ask not what is right for us, but what is right or wrong for them. Yeah. Or better yet, not ask at all, just leave them to make their own decisions for themselves. But when is that ever going to happen? But but still, we've got off onto a philosophical tangent there, so is it maybe time to move on to the next segment?
Okay, I was going to raise one question, because one criticism that you sometimes hear about Cybermen and things like this is that it's, I don't know if it necessarily embraces or causes it, but it reflects a fear of disability, like people with prosthetic limbs, and people may have been quite scared of the idea of a heart transplant at the time.
I wouldn't say fear of disability, fear of technology. Especially your point about the heart transplant. That was almost certainly the influence for this in some way, shape or form. Because it's no different from today, the fear of genetically modified organisms or frankenfood. Humans begin tampering with nature. How long before we end up as the Cybermen or the Borg?
I mean, right at the beginning they said explicitly, our lifespans were getting shorter, so we figured out how to replace our organs with new ones or something like that, our parts with new ones. So yeah, the organ transplant fear, it's not played subtly. It's pretty clear that, the idea of replacing your organs with new ones to expand your lifespan and improve your life is what led to the Cybermen.
Indeed.
Yeah. We've got to imagine this is the year of big news. A heart has been transplanted. And I don't actually know if the term transhumanism existed at the time. But is it less a fear of disability? I know you said technology. Did they have some idea of the concept of transhumanism, and this is why it's a bad idea?
But going to the point Coqui was making, humans being logical and rational, it's a bullshit meme that's automatically a bad thing. Well, the point you're making, the problem there is, Coqui, if we are entirely logical and rational, then we are no longer human. By that I mean that even when this is another point I'm always making in my videos. On YouTube, Hannibal, Sequester Zone, most of my fellow wishy-washy, lefty, liberal, socialist, pinko, culturally Marxist feminazis make the same point. That people claim that they're being rational, objective, etc. No, you're bigoted like a mofo. Isn't it amazing how everyone's guilty of cherry picking, straw manning, and odd ad hominems, and twisting the facts to fit their worldview, except you. But yes, the whole basis of transhumanism is the flaws of humanity, the weaknesses of humanity. The kind of Vulcan philosophy that emotion is weakness, etc., etc., etc. When the joke, especially in things like Voyager with Tuvok, is you are emotional, you just refuse to admit it. But it's just.
Well, Vulcans didn't change their biology; they changed their culture.
Exactly. Yeah. They developed a system of meditation and intense self-analysis which allows them to deconstruct their own emotions. They do explore this quite thoroughly in an episode of Voyager, which is good up to a certain point, but it's the whole thing again of being subjective. Isn't it amazing how everyone's bigoted and everyone's just appealing to emotion and everyone is just twisting the facts to suit themselves, except you? It's almost enough to make you think that you're not as rational or as objective as you think you are. But that's the thing. We can, no matter how rational we try to be. This is a point Sequester's Own made recently in a video. We can't do it 100% of the time. That something is always going to slip past, unless we start replacing parts of our brains with computer technology, and our failing and weak and primitive bodies with cybernetics and so on and so forth. Dude, you want to be a Cyberman. Get over it.
I actually wrote about the Cybermen in school because of I did religious studies for final GCSEs.
I feel like... I'm sorry, Con.
I was just going to say, because one of the questions in religious studies is where is the soul? Because if the soul is in all of you, do you lose a bit of your soul if you lose an arm? If you were a brain in a jar but functioning, are you still you, or have you lost the soul at that point? I would argue, if you look at the fact that Christopher Reeve, when paralysed from the neck down, still directed films and things, there was still that creative thing going on there, and it shows us how unquantifiable what being human is. Sorry, Coqui.
Yeah, I guess I took in what you, James, was saying, and I feel like my problem with this trope that goes on is that it creates a false dichotomy between being rational and having values and whatnot. And,
Exactly.
I've heard this kind of thing like the straw Vulcan, that Vulcans present this idea of what it means to be rational, when in reality, I think that someone could be very passionate and very emotional and still be totally rational.
Absolutely. Again, I hate to keep plugging my own YouTube channel, but this is one of the fundamental points I've made. People do think it's a false dichotomy between logic or emotion, but no. The true goal is an interweaving of the two, perception.
It's what we see all the time, is people thinking in binary.
Exactly.
I would say obviously they were clearly going for it, because there's more than one monster, as we've touched upon in this story. Mm-hmm. Cutler being monumentally irrational and emotional, and is also dangerous. Yeah. So yes, it does present us with the two polar extremes.
Why did he jump to the Z-bomb? I'm just wondering, if the Z-bomb presented a risk, what about the B through Y bombs? Like, there must have been something less dangerous.
Good point. Yes, there was no progression to it. Just go to the most extreme thing.
Exactly, that's the point. He wants genocide. He is not thinking. His son is going to die, and he just wants revenge. So Ben was guilty of sabotage. So yes, bring the Doctor as well. He still can't bring himself to shoot Polly because he's a sexist pig, and he can't bring himself to shoot Barclay because he still needs him. But if the Cybermen hadn't come in and shot him at that point, in a wonderful example of poetic justice, all contrivance.
Actually, I do want to talk about the fact that this is set in 1986. Now, I was 5 in 1986, and I don't know if I ever watched international news, the International News Channel it was called, but I don't remember any of this. That's weird. There's supposed to be Cybermen all over the world. But anyway, seriously, they're writing 20 years in the future, which is always interesting when science fiction writers go for not that far in the future. And I think there's even a reference to there having been several moon landings. And of course, it's an example of Doctor Who assuming, because remember, Cutler actually says there are 2 Z-bombs, and we know exactly what he means when he says there are 2 Z-bombs on Earth. He means the West has one and the East has one. And yes, Doctor Who always assumes the Cold War would still be going on, which of course it was still going on well, not much longer to go, but it was still going on in 1986. In fact, it was still quite tense in the 80s, as far as I'm aware. Mm-hmm. So yes, you get that sort of interesting thing in there. That wasn't 1986 the year that the Challenger blew up?
Yes.
Right. So there's another interesting thing. So I think the space program was actually rested for about 5 years?
Something like that. Yes. And,
yeah.
And now all of the shuttles that survive are literally falling apart.
Right, before I move on to the next bit, I'm just going to read some interesting sort of facts about this. It was broadcast from the 8th of October 1966 to the 29th of October 1966, and the ratings shot during the 4 episodes from 5.5 million to 7.5, so it literally gained 2 million. So this presumably is the immediate impact of the Cybermen. It actually got a mixed critical reception. But clearly audiences really, really loved it. And I suppose the next thing because we have talked about the original Cybermen a lot, so that doesn't have to be its own bit, I don't think. I'll start with Coqui, because
just a second before you do that, Alex. It's not just the Cybermen. As I say, this was the 60s. There was the promise of landing on the moon, going into space. The space race was still a thing. So the end of the first cliffhanger, the end of the first episode, the first cliffhanger, will we be able to get these astronauts down alive? That would have been a major draw for many people.
Yes, that's very true. And now you mentioned the astronauts. Another piece of trivia, right? It's the astronaut on the right. His spacesuit is the one that's in Star Wars, but I forget exactly where it is and when. So yes.
So the Australian astronaut, as opposed to the token Australian and the token black.
But the very spacesuit that would be. I'll put it in the description where and when in Star Wars that appears. Right, so, Coqui, I think it's fair to say that, Hartnell so far is your only classic series Doctor. You weren't entirely keen on him. Now you've seen the entire First Doctor era, which, I've got to say, of course, there's a lot of it. I'm thinking he might have more minutes than any other era. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. But we've gone through over 3 years' worth of television, broadcasting, 50 weeks of the year, quite a lot. So, all right, you've been exposed to a lot of William Hartnell, which, if he's not exactly your favourite Doctor, might be quite trying. But now we've reached the end. I mean, overall, what's your opinion now that he's gone?
I think he held the role for a little too long. He wasn't. I'd say of the Doctors that I know of, which, granted, he's my only classic Doctor, he's my least favorite. There were times that he wasn't awful, obviously there are episodes I like, not just in spite of him, but sometimes because of him, he's interesting. But yeah, I think that this was overdue.
Okay, well, let's hope that you like Patrick Troughton. I can tell you that Matt Smith, because actors quite often go through this, can I do this? Matt Smith was terrified of playing the Doctor, and they gave him some DVDs, and he watched some Patrick Troughton, and he went, and it just clicked, and that's why he asked for a bow tie. In fact, at the very end, in his last half a season, he's even wearing Patrick Troughton's bow tie. So you've seen Matt Smith's homage to the Second Doctor. It's interesting because 11 is 1 and 1, 2, Anyway, sorry, coincidence. Anyway,
Half-Life 3 confirmed.
So basically, you've seen the homage. You liked the homage to Patrick Troughton, so now you get to see the original. And James, your overall assessment of William Hartnell and the First Doctor era?
Just to address what Coqui said about Hartnell holding on to the role for a bit too long before I give my own overview, my own opinion, you've got to remember at this point, William Hartnell was the Doctor. As far as most of the world, most of the BBC was concerned, there was no Doctor Who without William Hartnell. As far back as the Celestial Toymaker, well, not that far, they had been trying to figure out a way to get someone else in to play the Doctor, but there was still this fundamental point of how can it be Stargate SG-1 without Colonel O'Neill, but more so because the rest of the cast wouldn't be there. The rest of the cast, there was no rest of the cast really, especially after Ian and Barbara left. So this was a point I made a couple of weeks ago about not Stuart, I'm thinking about He Who Moans, but Stephen's departure, the fact that he is the most underrated companion, because back in the 1960s people were saying, oh, Ian and Barbara, the show will never be the same again without our beloved Ian and Barbara. But, you know, if you were born in the 60s, 70s and 80s, if you weren't there for the original, dude, this is Coqui's point, you've seen others come and go, so you can just look at them as another pair of companions, or in this case, Hartnell, another Doctor. And yes, the original idea of Doctor Who, Father Christmas meets C.S. Lewis meets the H.G. Wells, The Time Machine, this kind of grumpy, elderly, wise figure very much played into the archetype of the wise man, the wizard. He was Merlin. Oh God, what's that line from the Sylvester McCoy era? I hate all these myths about good wizards. They always turn out to be him. But oh no, I think that was new series.
That was
in River Song.
River Song.
Yeah, so that's the problem. I have a perception filter around her, so I reconstruct my memories to make them palatable. But no, William Hartnell himself, he was the original. This is the basis on which all other Doctor Who is built. This is the groundwork. It's not that anyone else is copying him or trying... Well, no, no, this is the centre of the Doctor Who universe. Whether it's conscious or not, whether they're deliberately copying him or deliberately trying to avoid copying him, every other Doctor is... every other Doctor... is basing their character around Hartnell in some way. And also, not just Hartnell, the series itself. Everything about what Doctor Who is and what Doctor Who could be, the boundaries were set by the Hartnell era. So, this is... This, again, for us in the mid-2010s, it's just another regeneration.
Yes, of course.
And even then, the fact that it's done without any pomp or ceremony or that is a point. When David Tennant regenerated, oh my God, it'll never be the same. Doctor Who is dead now. And then when Matt Smith regenerated, oh my God, Doctor Who is dead. It'll never be the same again. But so this would have been a major oh my God moment. But now looking back on it 50 years, oh, it's just another regeneration.
Kids at the time thought it was just another cliffhanger for a plot point, and then the first Doctor would be back.
Yeah.
But by the end of the next serial, which is 6 episodes, by the end of it, Pat Troughton was established. But there was an initial very funny bring back the Doctor. But yes, people watching this didn't know what was going on, which wouldn't happen again until, I suppose, Eccleston's regeneration, where half of the audience were new. But even they would have read about David Tennant coming in. They just wouldn't have known what regeneration was. But yes, this was a monumental piece of television, which apparently was going to be done a bit differently, but they, as usual, were pushed for time. So I think his last words were something like, I must resist, or I won't give in, something like that. Interesting, he had to run back to the TARDIS to regenerate, or rejuvenate is actually the term that we're going to hear in the next serial.
Yeah.
But his actual last words, I do love the almost meta moment. It's a meta line. It's far from being all over. Yeah. He's talking to the audience. This show will go on, which I thought was touching. His actual final line is "keep warm," which I think is a nicely compassionate thing to have as a final line.
I thought it was kind of patronising because that line was directed solely at Polly. And she's being taken to the Cybermen's spaceship as a hostage as well. And don't forget your coat, dear. I wouldn't want you to catch a chill.
Yes, well, he was a man born in the Edwardian era.
Yeah, I know. Again, that moment with Vicky in the Crusades.
Yes. It would have been a major thing at the time. They don't make much of a meal out of it in terms of kind of sentiment because you don't know it's happening.
Yeah.
Actually, I can tell another piece of trivia. This entire 4-part serial was not written to be William Hartnell's last. That's a rewrite. I think they did seed though. They go back and they have. I think it's episode 2. He says this old body of mine's wearing a bit thin.
No, I think it is later. Yeah, it's episode 3 when he's fallen asleep for a good part of it. Again, this is something that Pertwee does. They have apparently Time Lords, although we haven't heard the term yet, can go into a kind of deep sleep, almost hibernation to heal themselves.
It's called a retreat.
A retreat to heal themselves. But again, that is just another example of how everything is based around what happened with Hartnell, whether it was deliberate or not, whether it was just again calling it rejuvenation. It's like the first time we hear the Daleks, they say fire. It's not until the end of the Hartnell era, the Daleks' master plan, that they're saying exterminate. Even then, they're saying annihilate. And other terms that end with 8.
Everything. Sometimes it even rhymes. And we will know a lot about the story of the first 3 years of Doctor Who and William Hartnell and the producer Verity Lambert next week. When we discuss the docu-drama, which actually, it'll be almost the anniversary... Well, it'll be almost the anniversary of Doctor Who and almost the first anniversary of the docu-drama. And I'm hoping we'll get Ian back, because he hasn't seen that before. So hopefully that'll be a fascinating podcast, and a bit of a game changer for us as well. I think, before I go to final thoughts and goodbye, shall I open up the floor if anyone else has anything to say, or a new topic, or... No?
No,
someone in the show said the Z-bomb, someone else on the show said the Z-bomb. Good example of cultural differences.
Yep. Is it Z or is it Z? My final thought on the Hartnell era is that they made 29 Doctor Who stories without needing a sonic screwdriver. Just saying. So, Coqui, final thought and goodbye.
My final thoughts are that even in the distant future year of 1986, A space station on the South Pole is not a good idea.
Aha. Okay, anything from the hamster?
Yes, may the hamster of, I guess, regeneration be upon your heads.
Excellent, that's how it's done. And you, James?
It's rejuvenation, Coqui, not regeneration. And yes, the William Hartnell series era as a whole, just like the rest of Doctor Who, it had its ups, it had its downs, it had its stellar points, oh Stephen, and it had its absolute atrocities. But and likewise, on to the Patrick Troughton era. Where we can expect it to be the same yet different. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And may the great holy donkey bless your rejuvenation if ever you should have one yourself.
Hurrah! Okay, well, I hope everyone has enjoyed this rather special Doctor Who Fridays, and tune in next week to hear us discuss An Adventure of Space and Time. And yes, indeed, it's far from being all over.